Good morning. My name is Stephanie Gidgbi Jenkins. I'm the Vice President of Strategies for Communities First, and I just want to thank you and welcome you for being here today. I want to actually reground in what Benny has offered as an invitation. Throughout this day, this conversation is really an invitation for us to really practice the ways in which we may be able to reimagine how we invest in a more just and equitable future, and really a more just and equitable clean energy future, which will require all of us to play a very specific role in this moment. I know you traditionally don't come into convenings with a level of grounding in this way, but what we really wanted to start with in our opening was to really ground our humanity and the places in which we come from. As a cultural bearer who practices the art of remembering, it is important for us to really understand the why we do this work before we talk about transactional deals, financing costs, liquidity, and what it takes to actually make a deal happen. So my assignment in this moment is really to help just ground what the day is going to look like, feel like. And throughout the day, we're going to continue to push you to really continue to think about how do we invest? How do we create non-extractive ways? How do we create new partnerships with community? How do we start to really develop a new way in which we may be able to really advance something that we haven't seen before? I want to ground in the magnitude of the federal funding that is flowing into communities at the number of trillions that are flowing into states at the level of billions, which can't match the level of philanthropic investments at the millions. But what we do have in this room are folks who sit at every level of government influence and power, whether community-based organizations from across this country, whether financial entities who have raised their hands in this moment to say that they want to be stewards of the federal funding and how it may flow into communities, or whether philanthropic entities who have committed to hopefully partner with communities to think about how we invest in a very different way. The other piece that I wanted to do was really help to ground both the magnitude, but also the dollars that we're talking about and how they all may be able to come together. I want to go back to Benny's invitation and the notion of recognizing that you are a creative person. And in that ability to really kind of think about what an underwriting cost means and how you start to look at how deals come together, there are ways in which you allow for the numbers to make sense for places across this country. And the reason why we wanted to have this conversation in this moment at this time was because before things get announced, like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or the Community Change Fund, or some of the other larger inflation reduction dollars, we wanted to make sure that there was an invitation for people to actually be in relationship with each other in a very different way. And to be able to really start to really connect with the projects and the people who have been advocating for decades for these resources. It's also a moment and an opportunity for us to really think about land, and not just ownership, but stewardship along the spectrum of what that might look like. And have an honest conversation, particularly for many community groups who may want to be part of this notion of community as developer. What will it take to really do that? Beyond the pieces of barriers that limit us, whether it's the utilities, whether it's zoning, land use, whether it's the actual liquidity that will be required to unlock these dollars, what we know is that every community has a plan. What they have not had is the opportunity to unlock those dollars. This is that moment. And this is the opportunity that's being presented. So throughout this day, what you will have is an invitation to really imagine in a very different way. What I will do, in just walking us through the agenda, is both invite one of my colleagues who's been helping to do this work and who has been helping to really kind of think about this moment, Sylvia from the Just Solutions Collective, because over the last few years, Communities First, which is both a fund helping to support and unlock federal funding for community-based organizations across this country and small and mid-sized places, to really think about how they collectively support a co-governance strategy around place, and people. And in order to do that, we've spent a lot of time with the federal government really thinking about how do we create the enabling conditions to actually work in support of communities in this moment. And one of those alliances that have been formed is both the Community's First Infrastructure Alliance, but also the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund Equity and Governance Best Practice Alliance, to be able to actually set a threshold in this moment for what we mean when we say that if you are raising your hands to receive and be a steward of $27 billion, that there's an inherent responsibility to also be able to have a different conversation about what that investment looks like, to really maximize this moment, to be in support of communities and not extractive in what that transactional and financial process may look like. In about a few minutes, we will welcome the Deputy Secretary of Treasury, Wally Adeyemo, to come really speak about what this means in this moment. And we will have, following that, a federal panel, but particularly from the administration, where we'll have Christina Costa, who's the Deputy Advisor to the President for Clean Energy and Innovations, to talk about both the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, but some key programs within it, both rebates, direct pay, and the Community Change Grant. Direct pay offers a new opportunity for us to really have the federal government offer an advance payment towards really making some clean energy choices. Community change has really offered an opportunity for communities to be able to be seated in the amount and the range of, depending if whether you want to advance a co-governance strategy in your community, up to $3 million, or whether you actually want to develop a project, up to $10 to $20 million being made available. This is a level of equity that we've never seen go directly to community-based organizations to really advance the future that they want to see as part of that. We'll take a break, and after that, we will have a conversation with Representative Dingle, who her plus Markey, and in addition to Van Hollen, have helped to really craft the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund so they can speak to the intent of this program, because we really want to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what this means in this moment. And then we'll take a break to really have a conversation about what does it mean to support community as developer. And what we, in selecting the panelists and the folks who we've brought together, what we really wanted to do was highlight some of the folks who are helping to lead the way. Both Shiva Patel from the DC Green Bank, but we're inviting Shiva less for the Green Bank and more for the fact that he's been doing this work in community for a very long time and have seen both the challenges and the opportunities of what it means to allow for a deal to come together. We'll have Bracken from Working Power talk about and actually share numbers. When you talk about wanting to support solar, community solar, what does that look like in place? We'll have Rawa from formerly of Push Buffalo, but now part of the EJ agency, talk about what it means for community to actually sit in the space of developer. And we'll have Sarah from the McKnight Foundation talk about what does it look like for philanthropy to leverage their program-related investments in support of community vision, plan, and processes. This is an invitation for many of the funders in this room to really reimagine in a very different way. Last year at this time, many of us were in this room talking about what does it look like to invest in our future. And we're still having that conversation. So we're hoping that there may be some action that's taken as part of that. We'll break for lunch and really start to talk about what does it mean to democratize development. And in this is really about having a conversation around how do we support investment in such a way that the policies are enabled in a way that really supports the things that we've been talking about in the morning time. We've invited all of the national folks who have raised their hands to go after the Clean Investment Fund, which is considered the Green Bank, to speak. 3 out of the 5 who've applied have agreed to be available. We're encouraged by that because we believe that there's a level of accountability if you're going to take on $14 billion as a grant. And we're hoping that those who chose not to come, that they will still be accountable to being able to really talk about what their vision was and saying that they were supporting communities. We'll do breakouts in the afternoon, and it's really an opportunity for us to really talk about what it means to maximize this opportunity And so we'll have Treasury really go deeper on direct pay, and we're really excited by the folks who will be presenting, in addition to the Community Change Grant. And we'll also have a session really talking about how do you actually support kind of these solar clean deals that we've been talking about by folks who've been helping to lead that. The second breakout session is really both one that will focus on the housing, but also we'll have an unconference style. We'll be talking a lot at you, and we're hoping that the afternoon offers an opportunity for us to really collaborate on what you may be able to see and how we may be able to partner. And then we'll close out with a nice networking reception. With that, I want to thank you for going on the journey with us. We continue to invite you to stay open as we think about what this discussion looks like. And I'll invite Sylvia to come up and talk a little bit more about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund Best Practice Pledge Alliance. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm really glad to be able to welcome you all here. As Stephanie said, I'm Sylvia Chi with Just Solutions Collective and also a founder of the GGRF Equity and Governance Best Practices Alliance, which probably needs a better name. We're a group of organizations with deep experience in environmental, economic, and racial justice. And the Alliance grew out of some conversations that I was having with some close collaborators this time last year after the IRA passed, especially collaborators from the Climate and Clean Energy Equity Fund and Emerald Cities Collaborative. And those conversations led to the beginning of the development of the GGRF Best Practices Pledge. And what we did was we brought together policy experts to draw on our collective expertise and on-the-ground experience working with environmental justice and equity-focused programs and green finance to ensure that the GGRF is implemented in a way that truly centers environmental justice communities. So we've done a lot of the typical policy advocacy, submitting comments and recommendations to EPA, but we've also worked a lot engaging with the applicants to the GGRF. So during the application phase, we worked with applicants to help them incorporate strong equity and governance elements in their applications. And now and in the coming months, we'll be exploring how we can support developing a pipeline of projects, community-centered projects, and also how we can facilitate connections among community-based organizations, the awardees, community lenders, and everyone else in the GGRF ecosystem. So as Stephanie already laid out, today's gathering is meant to be a catalyst for those connections that we need to make to better coordinate and unlock the potential of this program. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. Do I hand it back to Stephanie? Or should I just introduce the Deputy Secretary? Okay. I am honored to introduce the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, who has arrived right on time.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. It is wonderful to be here with you. And I know that when you sit in rooms like this and you're here for convenings, it's easy to forget what we're doing here and what you're doing here. And what you're doing here is you're helping to make history. You're helping to shape what is probably the largest transformation of the United States economy, of the world economy, since the invention of the combustion engine. It's easy to forget all of that because you're deep in the technical details, you're doing the work in communities. And the reason doing the work in communities matters is because too often when we've had these types of transformations, we focused more on the macro than on the micro. More on how it's going to affect everyone than how it's going to affect anyone. And today we're focusing on people in communities that are often left behind and left out. And I like to focus on one of the greatest things that happened in our country, which was the building of the interstate highway system, which transformed America in so many ways and created real opportunities for our economy to grow. But we often forget about the communities that were left out when that happened. Those highways were built over communities. They were built in ways where off-ramps were built in places that didn't give communities access. And before I took this job, I lived in one of those communities on the south side of Chicago, where you would interact with children who lived on the south side of Chicago who could see the Chicago skyline, but had never been there. They had never been less than a few miles away from their home because public transportation didn't make that possible. And today, as we think about the transformation of the economy, and we talk about everything related to the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a revolutionary piece of legislation, I think it's critical that we think about how this transformation can be done with these communities, not done to these communities. And that's exactly what this organization is built to do. And I know that there are so many different elements, and when you think about them, from the tax credits, which my agency is the chief designer of, to the greenhouse fund that EPA holds, to the loan and grant programs at the Department of Energy, it is easy for even those of us who are sophisticated students of this to be very confused, let alone the communities that need to take advantage of them. That's why the work that you do is so essential, helping to think through how we can take the myriad of things that we are doing that are all going to lead to the change that we want to see in the world, but making sure that these communities are able to take advantage of those things and to use those things not only to help solve a challenge that's happening to them in terms of the climate impact, which you all know is being felt more by these communities who have been left out and left behind than other communities in the country, but also find ways for them to be investors in the economic future so that they can unlock the potential that is unrealized in those communities as well, is something that we're focused on at the Treasury Department. And from our standpoint, that starts with thinking about these tax credits differently. And the way I talk about it with my colleagues at the Treasury Department is, how do we solve what I call the last mile problem, which is the idea that while we have these programs, the people who often access them are not the ones who need them the most. And the only way we're going to solve that last mile problem is by working with groups like yours. Ultimately, government can't do this alone. And we've seen that time and time again in the programs that we've implemented, that ultimately, in order to get them into the hands of the people who need them most, we need those who are closest to those communities to help us. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm joined by a number of my colleagues who are going to talk to you in more detail about the programs and the initiatives that we are launching at Treasury related to the Inflation Reduction Act, but helping to, with you, dream about a world in which the communities that need them most actually get access to them first, not last, is something that we need your help on. And that starts with a number of the programs that we've already unlocked in the federal government that, from my view, we're not having these communities take advantage of enough. Everything from some of the tax credits that are intended for these communities, be they the tax credits that go to energy communities and communities that have traditionally helped us produce fossil fuels, now that we want to help them transition and make sure that the people who did the laborious work of going into coal mines now have the ability to benefit from tax credits that allow us to transition those former coal communities into renewable energy communities, to communities that have been economically deprived for too long that have real potential. And we're already seeing IRA dollars flow into those communities. I was just in Atlanta, Georgia last week, and 33 of the projects related to IRA that are worth $14 billion have been announced in the state of Georgia. 33 projects in the state of Georgia. Yeah, that does deserve a round of applause. And I think part of this is because they've not only been announced, but they've been announced in communities where you have below national average of wages and college graduation rates, which gives you a sense as to what I think is the real benefit here of the IRA. It both provides consumer level credits that will help people do things like improve the energy efficiency of their home, reduce the cost of energy, which is a major cost, but also creating these green energy jobs. And because of provisions like the prevailing wage provision and apprenticeship provision, it puts you in a place where those clean energy jobs that are being created can lead to clean energy careers, so that individuals in these communities not only become invested in getting that job, but building a career that allows them to help us deal with a climate crisis that's existential for all of us. But in order for this to work in places like from Georgia to Ohio to New York to California and the communities that need it most, we need your help. Fundamentally, we can't do this alone in the federal government because the information is both too complicated, and we are not in the communities in the ways that you are or the organizations that you sponsor are. That's why we are here, and we want to do this in partnership with you. Fundamentally, the only way that this is going to work, the only way we're going to accomplish our goals is if we do it in partnership. Because when I talk about 33 projects and $14 billion, the question I get from someone who is living in Atlanta, Georgia is, how do I get one of those jobs? How do I get the skills that I need to get one of those jobs? And we're going to make investments in terms of helping to upskill people, but fundamentally that needs to be married with information and with knowledge transfer that can only be done in partnership with organizations like yours. So I'm excited about this convening, about the possibility here to both think about things like the Greenhouse Reduction Fund, but also to think about how you marry together the myriad things we're doing in the federal government with the things that you have been doing for a long time in those communities to make sure that these individuals have access to both the information and the resources to do exactly what each one of us want to do, which is create opportunity for our families, and to do it in a way that helps us fight what is an existential threat to all of us. So I don't want to take up much of your time because I know that the work doesn't happen here on stage. It happens in the conversations you're going to have and in the learnings that you're going to have throughout this day. But I wanted to join you to just say a word of gratitude for doing the work. Because ultimately it is, even though I know it is a labor of love, it is labor. And part of what we have to do in the federal government is make it as easy as possible for you to understand what we're trying to accomplish and to take your advice so that we can do it in a way that gets to those communities as easily as possible. So I'm hoping that today isn't only an opportunity for us to tell you, but for us to hear from you in terms of what we can do to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible for you to reach the communities that we all care about. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today and to be in conversation with us. But my hope, and I know that this already exists because many of you have already been on this journey with us for a number of years, is that this is just a continuation of a journey of us walking together to have the type of impact in these communities that we care deeply about going forward. And I look forward to seeing you again and appreciate all the work that you do. Thanks for your time.
So I wanted to make sure that we did a little bit of a roll call of who we actually have in the room. If you represent a community-based organization, could you raise your hands? Could we get some shout outs? We need to liven up this room a little bit more. Okay. And if you are representative of kind of a financial institution, financing, TA, okay. All right. If you're an advocacy group who's out here really making sure that these laws, these rules, these enabling conditions are working in support of community, can we hear you? Can we see you? Okay. If you're a philanthropic funder who is helping to really think about how to leverage your resources in this moment, if we can hear, if we can see you. Okay. Did I miss anyone? Impact investors, okay. Public sector, government folks who are here as well. Okay. Who else? Academia. Okay. All right, and then we're gonna do a roll call from across the country, and we're just gonna do it by region. So New England. All right. Okay, all right. We'll come down to the Mid-Atlantic, so I'm gonna just, okay. Y'all will rock out. Okay, thank you. Southeast. Okay, we're in the building. All right, we're gonna cut over to the Midwest. Okay, we got some representation. That's beautiful. We're gonna go over to I'm gonna call it the mountain region of the country. Welcome. Southwest. Oh, okay. And we're gonna go to the West Coast. Oh, we got a contingency here, I see. Did I miss anyone? We did okay, well, Northeast, we'll do another one. New York, y'all said y'all not Mid-Atlantic. Okay, got it. You just wanted me to say New York and New Jersey. Understood. All right. All right. So we've got 5 minutes until the next panel comes up. I know that folks were eating. Feel free to do the transition. I'd also welcome the panelists to come on stage so that we can start promptly at 10 a.m. Thank you.